Hey everyone, before we begin, please subscribe to the channel and stay with me till the end. You won't want to miss how this unfolds. The rain had just started to fall over Leipzig, soft and persistent, the kind that darkened the cobblestones and made the street lamps blur into halos. I stood outside my parents' apartment building, staring at the windows I'd grown up behind, my coat still smelling faintly of the piano workshop where I worked. That was the day I learned the truth. My parents had sold my grandmother's antique piano, the one she left only to me, and used the 95,000 euros to build my brother a business. The piano wasn't just furniture. It was my childhood, my refuge, my bond with the only person who had ever really seen me. Oma Elise had lived in a narrow house near the old canals, one where ivy climbed the walls and the air always smelled of wet leaves and coffee. She taught me to play on that piano, her fingers thin and steady, guiding mine over the keys. "This piano survived 2 wars," she used to say. "Now it will survive your mistakes too." When she died, she left it to me in a neat, careful will. Not to my parents, not to my brother, to me. I trusted my parents to store it while I was finishing my studies in Dresden. I trusted them because that's what daughters do when they still want to believe in fairness. Inside the apartment, my mother, Anke, was slicing apples at the kitchen counter, her movements calm, almost cheerful. My father, Rolf, sat reading the newspaper, glasses low on his nose. Everything looked normal, and that somehow made it worse. "Where's the piano?" I asked. My mother's knife paused for half a second. That was all the warning I got. "We sold it," she said gently, as if telling me they'd changed internet providers. It was just sitting there, and Marcus needed capital. You know how hard it is to start a business. Marcus, my older brother, golden boy, the one whose mistakes were always investments, whose failures were always learning experiences, the one who had never practiced piano a day in his life, but had once mocked me for choosing music over economics. "That piano was mine," I said. My voice sounded distant, like it belonged to someone else. My father folded the newspaper. "Legally, it was in our apartment, and family helps family. What about helping me?" My mother finally looked at me, her eyes tired, almost annoyed. "You have your workshop. You're managing. Marcus is trying to build something for his future." I laughed, sharp and short, with my inheritance. Silence settled between us, thick as the rain outside. That night, I walked along the river until my shoes were soaked through. Anger burned, but beneath it was something colder. Clarity. They hadn't just sold an object. They had sold my voice, my memories, my proof that I mattered. And they had done it without asking. I didn't confront Marcus right away. I watched instead. His cafe bar opened near the university, all exposed brick and vintage bulbs, calling itself Elise's Corner. I nearly choked when I saw the name. He told customers it honored our grandmother. He never mentioned that he paid for it by erasing her gift to me. So I planned. Revenge isn't loud at first. It's patient. And it learns the habits of the people who hurt you. I started by reconnecting with my Aunt Ingrid, my mother's sister, who had always been the quiet observer at family gatherings. Over coffee and poppy seed cake, I told her everything. She didn't interrupt. She just listened, eyes narrowing slightly. "That wasn't the first time your parents took something that wasn't meant for them," she said. She told me about a small property Elise had owned in the countryside, sold years ago to pay for Marcus's university fees. Supposedly, with Elise's blessing. Ingrid wasn't so sure. Patterns reveal themselves when you finally look. Next, I spoke to Herr Vogel, the lawyer who had handled my grandmother's will. He still had copies. Clear language. No ambiguity. The piano was mine, and so were several smaller assets that had quietly disappeared into family expenses. I didn't sue them. Not yet. Instead, I went to Marcus's cafe and asked for a job. He was surprised, suspicious, but also pleased. "Good to have family around," he said, clapping my shoulder. "And you can play piano here sometimes. Customers love live music." I smiled and agreed, even as my stomach twisted. I learned everything about his finances. The loans, the investors, the fact that he'd overstated profits to secure better terms. I watched how he treated staff, charming in public, sharp in private. I documented it all, quietly, carefully. At home, My parents started inviting me for dinner more often, as if proximity could smooth over betrayal. I played along, asked about their health, about neighbors, about nothing that mattered. Winter came early that year, frost glazing the rooftops, breath turning white in the air. Leipzig looked beautiful, and I felt hollow. Then I made my move. First, I contacted the investors anonymously, with evidence of the financial misrepresentations. Then I reported several labor violations I had witnessed. Then, through Ingrid, I reached out to distant relatives who had their own stories of family help that always seemed to flow in one direction. The cafe's reputation cracked before it collapsed. Inspections, withdrawn funding. Marcus called me one night, voice shaking with anger and panic. "Do you know who's doing this to me?" I said softly. "Maybe it's just consequences." He hung up. My parents came next. I didn't go after them legally, but socially. Quiet truths have a way of spreading in small communities. Friends began asking uncomfortable questions. Church acquaintances whispered. My mother stopped going to choir practice. One evening, my father showed up at my workshop, eyes red, shoulders slumped. "Why are you doing this?" I kept sanding a piano leg, the familiar rhythm steadying me. "Because you taught me that family takes what it needs, and the rest should just accept it. I'm finally using that lesson." He looked older than I had ever seen him. "We thought you'd understand. You were always strong." I set down my tools. "No, you thought I'd stay quiet." Marcus's cafe closed by spring. He moved back into my parents' apartment, furious and humiliated. The tension in that household became unbearable, every meal thick with blame and regret. But revenge is never as clean as you imagine. One afternoon, Ingrid called me, voice trembling. My mother had collapsed during an argument with Marcus. Stress, the doctor said. She would recover, but slowly. For the first time, I hesitated. I hadn't wanted illness. I had wanted recognition, accountability. I visited her in the hospital, sunlight filtering through pale curtains. She looked smaller, fragile, nothing like the woman who had once decided my inheritance was expendable. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't think you'd fight back." I swallowed. That's the problem. When she was discharged, I did something no one expected. I gave my parents a choice. They could transfer to me the remaining assets from my grandmother's estate, what little was left, or I would proceed legally, publicly, and without restraint. They signed. With that money, I did not buy back the original piano. It was gone. I'm in a private collection, unreachable. Instead, I opened a small music school in Elise's name, offering lessons to children who couldn't afford them. I placed a plaque in the entryway, in memory of Elise Weber, who believed music should belong to those who listen. Marcus never apologized. He blamed me for his failure, for our mother's health, for everything except his own choices. We no longer speak. My parents attend school concerts sometimes, sitting in the back, quiet, uncertain where they fit in my life now. I let them come. Forgiveness, I learned, doesn't mean forgetting. It means choosing how much space someone gets in your future. On the first anniversary of the school's opening, I stayed late, locking up after the last child left. The building filled with echoes of scales and laughter. I ran my hand over the new grand piano in the main room, its surface cool and smooth, and imagined my grandmother's approving smile. I had lost something irreplaceable, but I had taken back something more important, my voice.